The chandelier light sparkled over the grand boardroom of the Royal Crown Hotel. At the head of the table, Mr. Harrington, a millionaire CEO known for his arrogance, threw his head back in laughter. His diamond cufflinks caught the light as his mocking voice filled the room. "You? A janitor?" he sneered, eyes locked on a man quietly pushing a mop bucket near the door. "You can't even understand these papers, let alone a $10 million deal." The room fell into an awkward silence. A dozen well-dressed business partners exchanged uneasy glances. Some tried to smile at the CEO's joke, but their eyes betrayed doubt. The janitor, a tall, quiet man with tired hands and calm eyes, paused for a brief moment. He didn't answer, didn't react, only looked at the floor with dignity. But the tension was already spreading. Investors whispered. The translator hesitated. Could the CEO really manage such a massive deal? The janitor's hands tightened on the mop handle, his face unreadable. What no one in that room knew was that behind the cheap uniform was a mind sharper than anyone at the table could imagine. Mr. Harrington adjusted his gold watch as he leaned back in his leather chair, radiating arrogance. His suit alone cost more than the annual salary of half his staff. On the table lay a thick folder of contracts worth $10 million, but the CEO barely skimmed through them. Why should he? In his mind, his money and power were enough to win any deal. "Gentlemen," he boasted, swirling a glass of imported whiskey, "by tomorrow this entire project will be mine. These investors won't dare say no to me." His voice carried the confidence of someone who had never been told no. Near the back wall, the janitor quietly pushed his cleaning cart. His name was David Santos. Every morning, he arrived before sunrise, sweeping floors that no one noticed, cleaning tables no one thanked him for. He moved like a shadow, invisible to the very people whose shoes left footprints he was paid to wipe away. But David was not an ordinary janitor. Tucked away in a drawer at home lay a diploma in business administration, along with certificates in finance and international trade. For years, he had applied for corporate jobs, sending out over 100 resumes. Each time, the rejection was the same. "We'll call you back." They never did. His skin color, his accent, his humble clothes, those spoke louder to employers than his education ever could. Now, here he was, scrubbing floors in a hotel where billion-dollar deals were made. No one in that room cared that he once spent nights buried in textbooks, learning the very regulations they were discussing. Mr. Harrington glanced at him with disdain. "Make sure the windows shine, Santos," he said loudly, smirking at his guests. It's the only numbers he knows, one broom, one bucket. The partners chuckled awkwardly, but the laughter faded when the investors opened their folders. They whispered to each other in hushed tones, pointing at sections of the documents. "Are these numbers correct?" One muttered in Mandarin. Another frowned. "Something doesn't add up." David froze for a split second. He understood every word. His heart pounded, but his face stayed calm. He knew the investors were right. The contracts were riddled with mistakes. Mistakes that could cost the company the entire deal. At the table, Harrington remained blissfully ignorant, bragging about profits he hadn't earned yet. The investors exchanged skeptical glances. Doubt was spreading like fire in the room. And in that moment, only one man knew the truth, the man everyone ignored. The polished oak doors of the boardroom swung shut, sealing the investors and executives inside. The meeting had begun. Mr. Harrington straightened his tie, flashing his trademark grin. "So, gentlemen," he said loudly, "as you can see, this project is a guaranteed success. A $10 million investment will look small once you see the profits rolling in." But across the table, the lead investor, Mr. Lee, remained stone-faced. He leaned forward, his voice sharp. "Mr. Harrington, can you explain how your proposed tax structure complies with the new international regulations?" The CEO blinked, his smile faltering. "Tax structure? Well," he shuffled the papers, pretending to read. His hands trembled ever so slightly. Another investor added, "And your figures here, these projections, how do they align with Brazil's updated foreign capital laws?" Beads of sweat began to form on Harrington's forehead. He cleared his throat. Of course. I'll explain." He discreetly pulled out his phone under the table, typing into a translation app. The screen flashed nonsense. Hot fish paper problem. Not good business. A muffled laugh escaped from one of the Chinese associates. The CEO's face turned red. Yes, well, the thing is, he fumbled, stringing together half sentences that made less and less sense. The investors exchanged looks of disbelief. One whispered, "Is this man even prepared?" Another shook his head. At the edge of the room, David, the janitor, moved silently with his mop, pretending to polish the floor. But his ears caught every word. He understood the investors' Mandarin perfectly. He understood the financial jargon even better. Every question they asked, every number they highlighted. It was all clear to him. Inside his mind, thoughts raced. The documents are flawed. He's missing the compliance forms. If he doesn't fix this, the entire deal will collapse. David's grip on the mop tightened. He wanted to speak, to correct the CEO's blunders, but he knew the rules. Janitors weren't supposed to interrupt million-dollar meetings. They weren't supposed to speak at all. Meanwhile, Harrington's charade grew worse. He laughed too loudly, avoided direct answers, and kept glancing at his phone. "Gentlemen, rest assured, my team has looked into all of this. You have nothing to worry about." But his voice cracked on the last word. The investor's patience thinned. "Nothing to worry about," one repeated coldly. "You cannot even answer the simplest legal requirement." A suffocating silence fell over the room. Harrington's pride had led him here, and now, in front of the very men he needed most, he looked like a fool. And in the corner, invisible to them all, stood the only man who knew the answers. Every law, every figure, every loophole. "They don't see me," David thought bitterly. 4 years cleaning their floors, and not once did they care to know who I really am. And now, they're about to lose $10 million over questions I could solve in seconds. He lowered his gaze, torn between silence and action. Each passing second pushed him closer to a choice that could change everything. Mr. Lee's patience finally snapped. He pushed the stack of papers away with a sharp flick of his wrist. His voice, once calm, now cut through the room like a blade. "Enough," he said in Mandarin, his words laced with finality. "This level of unpreparedness is insulting. We cannot trust our money with a man who does not even understand his own proposal." The investors nodded in agreement. One closed his folder. Another checked his watch. The meeting, the $10 million deal, was slipping away. Harrington's face drained of color. His carefully crafted arrogance collapsed into desperation. He stood, wiping sweat from his forehead with a shaking hand. "Please, gentlemen, wait. This deal means everything to our company. My translators will arrive shortly. We just need more time." But the investors were already gathering their papers, preparing to leave. From the corner, David watched, silent as always. His mop leaned against the wall, forgotten. His eyes narrowed slightly, not in arrogance, but in quiet certainty. He had every answer Mr. Lee had demanded, memorized from years of study and wasted potential. The camera of fate seemed to zoom in on him. His eyes, calm and steady, contrasted starkly with Harrington's frantic gestures. Where the CEO drowned in panic, the janitor stood like an island of composure. Mr. Lee noticed. As he rose from his chair, his gaze flickered toward the man in the uniform. Just for a second, a small, almost imperceptible pause. Something about the janitor's stillness, the intelligence hidden behind those tired eyes, unsettled him. David looked back, meeting the billionaire's gaze. For the first time in years, someone looked at him not as furniture, not as a shadow, but as a man holding a secret. The silence was deafening. Investors shuffled. Harrington stammered. The deal was moments away from collapse. And then came the line, the thought that echoed like thunder inside David's mind. No one knew that the janitor was about to change the fate of everyone in the room. The tension in the boardroom was unbearable. Mr. Lee pushed back his chair, ready to leave. The deal was dead. And then a quiet voice broke the silence. "Excuse me." Every head turned. The voice had come from the corner of the room. David, the janitor, stood there, hands clasped nervously in front of him. His uniform was plain, his shoes worn, but his posture carried a calm strength. "I believe I can help," he said softly. For a moment, the room froze. Then Harrington exploded. "You!" he barked, his face red with fury. "You're a cleaner. This is a $10 million deal. Get out before you embarrass yourself even more." Laughter bubbled from a few of the CEO's loyalists, but it died quickly when David stepped forward, his gaze steady. He turned not to Harrington, but directly to Mr. Lee and spoke, in flawless, confident Mandarin. "Mr. Lee," he said, bowing slightly, "your concerns are justified. The document presented are incomplete. Allow me to clarify the tax compliance and foreign capital regulations you mentioned." The entire room went silent. Harrington's jaw dropped. The investors blinked in disbelief. Mr. Lee leaned forward, intrigued. He replied in Mandarin, deliberately complex. "If you truly understand, then explain how the new Brazilian regulations align with a holding company structure in Shanghai." Without hesitation, David answered, his voice calm and precise. He cited specific articles, timelines, and even compared the situation with Hong Kong's international agreements. His delivery was professional, polished, nothing like a janitor. The associates exchanged glances, impressed. One whispered, "His knowledge is sharper than most consultants I've hired." Another muttered, "This man is a genius." Harrington stammered, "TH, this is absurd. He's just a janitor." But his protest only highlighted his own ignorance. David continued, seamlessly addressing every concern Mr. Lee had raised. Each answer flowed with the confidence of someone who had not only studied the subject, but mastered it. He wasn't showing off. He was simply telling the truth he had carried in silence for years. Mr. Lee smiled faintly for the first time that morning. "Remarkable," he said, this time in English so everyone could hear. "A cleaning employee who speaks perfect Mandarin and understands international law." Harrington's face turned pale. The ground beneath his arrogance was crumbling, and in that moment, the balance of power in the room shifted. The man who had been invisible for 4 years now stood at the center of attention, and no one, not even the Millionaire CEO, could look away. Mr. Lee folded his arms, his sharp eyes studying David like a scientist examining a rare discovery. "Very well," he said in Mandarin, his tone testing. "If you truly understand, then explain this. The proposal lists 2 different corporate structures. One claims tax exemptions through a subsidiary. The other does not. How do you resolve this contradiction?" All eyes turned to Harrington. He fumbled with the papers, flipping them back and forth. Yes. That's a drafting error." "It doesn't matter," he muttered weakly. David stepped forward calmly. "It matters greatly, sir," he replied in Mandarin, his voice firm. "Without clarification, it invalidates the contract. However," he took a pen from his pocket and circled a paragraph. "If we align this section with the revised Article 47 of Brazil's international investment law, the contradiction disappears. It actually creates a tax benefit for your firm." The investors leaned in, murmuring in surprise. Mr. Lee's eyes glimmered with interest. "Impressive," Lee said. Then he leaned back, challenging again. "And the environmental regulations for new hotel developments? Your documents miss an entire section." Harrington's face turned red. "Well, obviously we were going to add that later." David cut in smoothly, respectful but assertive. "The deadline for approval is 12 months. If you wait, you lose the window. However, by filing under Clause 18, you gain fast-track approval. I've also prepared comparative analysis with Shanghai zoning laws." He spoke like a man who has spent years buried in books, nights memorizing laws by candlelight, mornings dreaming of opportunities that never came. Now, every word poured out like fire, measured, precise, undeniable. One investor whispered, "He knows more than the CEO." Another added, "No, he knows more than our own legal team." Harrington sank into his chair, his hands trembling. For the first time in his career, he had nothing to say. Mr. Lee closed the folder with a decisive snap. Then, slowly, he began to clap. The sound echoed in the silent boardroom. One by one, the other investors joined in until the room was filled with applause. Not for Millionaire in his $1,000 suit, but for the janitor in his worn uniform. "This," Mr. Lee declared in English, pointing at David, is the man we should trust with our $10 million. David bowed his head humbly, his heart pounding. Years of humiliation, silence, and invisibility, all erased in that one moment. Across the table, Harrington went pale. His lips moved, but no words came. The realization hit him harder than any blow. His arrogance had destroyed his reputation. The empire of pride he had built for years crumbled before his very eyes. And the janitor he had mocked had just taken his place in the spotlight. The applause faded, but the energy in the room did not. Mr. Lee rose from his chair, his voice firm and commanding. "This deal will only move forward," he announced. "If he pointed at David, is the one leading it." Gasps rippled through the boardroom. The associates looked at each other in shock. A janitor leading a $10 million investment? It sounded impossible, yet no one dared argue. Harrington's face twisted. "This is outrageous. He doesn't belong here. But Mr. Lee cut him off sharply. "Enough. Your arrogance nearly cost us millions. This man saved the deal. From this moment forward, I will not negotiate with you. I will negotiate with him." Silence fell. Harrington's shoulders slumped. He knew he had no choice. If he refused, the deal would collapse, and with it, his reputation. Grinding his teeth, he forced a smile that looked more like a grimace. "Fine," he muttered, his voice hollow. "He will lead." All eyes turned to David. For the first time in his life inside that building, he wasn't invisible. He wasn't just a man with a mop. He was the man at the table. An assistant quickly pulled out a chair beside the investors. David hesitated, then slowly sat down. His worn uniform contrasted with the polished suits around him, but the respect in her eyes made him shine brighter than any silk tie ever could. The employees who had always walked past him without a glance now stared in awe. Whispers spread across the room. "The janitor, he's leading the deal." David took a deep breath, his hand steady as he placed the documents in front of him. For years, the world had doubted him, ignored him, mocked him. But today, the world finally listened. In the days that followed, everything changed. David, once overlooked and treated like a shadow, was officially promoted. His new office overlooked the city skyline, but he never forgot the mop and bucket that had been his only companion for years. Employees who had never spoken his name now greeted him with respect. Investors sought his advice, eager to learn from the man who had saved a failing deal. Meanwhile, Harrington's world crumbled. News of the disastrous meeting spread quickly. He was still wealthy, but his pride had been shattered. For the first time, he realized that arrogance and status meant nothing without true knowledge and humility. One evening, as David left the building, he paused at the glass doors. He saw his reflection, not in the uniform of janitor, but in the confident stance of a leader. A soft smile crossed his face. He hadn't just changed his own life. He had changed the way everyone around him looked at worth, respect, and possibility. The camera zooms out as his voice echoes in narration. "Never judge a person by their job or clothes. True talent always finds a way to shine." The screen fades to black. Then, soft text appears. Sparkles if the story moved you. Subscribe for more life-changing stories.